got a great technique here to show you how to recreate the panning technique, which is a technique used in camera where you follow a moving subject while you release the shutter, and the idea is to keep the subject sharp while the background is blurred. And it creates the sense of movement that you wouldn't get with a fast shutter speed, and obviously if you use a slow shutter speed you're going to get the subject blurred. So we're going to show you how to do this in Photoshop. This is the finished image. If I turn everything off here, you can see how the image looked at the start, completely static. The motorbike is parked on this road, and our job is to create the artificial sense of movement by blurring the background. So I'm just going to delete these three layers here, so we're going to start from scratch. And the first thing we need to do, which is a laborious task unfortunately, is to cut out the guy on the motorcycle. There really is no other way to do this, and the best way to do this in Element is to make use of the magnetic tool. So if you zoom in close like so, and you can use spacebar to move around, and then we simply plot a point, and then we just move around the edge of the subject, and Elements will plot points for us automatically and hopefully get things right. If it makes a mistake, or you make a mistake by going a little bit wide of the edge, you can press backspace, and we're going to press it again to get back to the correct position, and like this. And you can also click to plot your own points if it doesn't like a certain edge and won't do things right. You just click down with a mouse to plot your own points. Now basically we need to go right the way round the outside of this image, and we're not going to do this here. I'm just going to double click that and deselect, as we'll be here all day on the video. You've got to do that in the comfort of your own home. So I've got one pre-saved. I can go here, load selection, and select motorbike 1 from the drop down menu. And what this is the exterior of the motorbike selected with the magnetic lasso tool, but we also need these little bits in between the forks here. We need this bit inside here, this bit in here, and this bit in here as well. We don't want those to be sharp while the rest of the background is blurred. It just won't look right. So what we need to do to select those is to switch to the polygonal lasso tool, and we actually select subtract from selection, which is the third icon across, because we want to remove these areas. This, if you remember, this whole outside area is selected, and we want to take these out of the selection. So again, it's just a matter of doing things manually. So you've got to move across and make your selection. Again, backspace if you make a mistake, and you can just move around making your selection like so. Again, I've already got one pre-saved to save us going through that task, so I can go load selection, and it's actually Moto 3 here. So that's our finished version. And the idea is we've got at the moment the motorcycle selected with these areas inside unselected. What we actually want is the background selected, as that is the area that we want to blur. So in that case we would do this. Now we want to work on a duplicate layer. I'm just going to deselect that now, and we can use Control and J to duplicate the background layer. I am going to then reactivate the selection. We can select invert there. It's a quick way of going about without having to use Control and Shift to I to invert. So the background's actually selected now, and we are ready to apply our blur, and we can do that with filter, blur, motion blur, and then it's up to us. We have a slider here. We want the angle to be horizontal. We want the blur to go this way to demonstrate a horizontal speed, a horizontal movement, and then it's the amount in pixels you can change. It depends very much on the pixel size of your sample image. 700 is good for the size here. For the CD image you'll probably need something slightly smaller, but this is fine. 700 pixels gives us a nice amount of blur, so I can click OK to complete that, and you can see the difference already there. So our next task is to examine the edges of the selection of the work we've done. So we're just going to use Control and deselect, and then we can zoom in like this. You can see the areas that we've selected with manually with a polygonal lasso tool aren't as good as the areas that we've done with the magnetic lasso. It's looking a bit rough here, and what we can do to improve that is to use the blur tool and just work up and down the edges. If you've got the same problem with the outside edges, you can just do the same. That's just to work over slowly, about strength 100%, and you can push that, just blur that a little bit. If you make a mistake, you can use Control and Z to undo and have another go, and it's just a matter of working around the image so those sharp edges blur into the background. Again, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you get the sense of what we're doing. The next thing we want to do after we've worked around the edges is to do the wider area. You can see with the blur applied we've got ghosting around the edges of the helmet, around the tyre this side, around the helmet that side, and that's something that's not too attractive. So to remove that, we can add a new layer like this and take the clone stamp tool. Shortcut for that is S. We need to make sure it's set to aligned and it's set to sample all layers, and then we resize the brush with the bracket key. And what we're also going to do here is to protect the bike itself, is to load the original selection, and there we go, like that. And again, we're going to invert it, so now only the background selected. We can't touch the motorbike and the guy no matter what we do in terms of cloning. So I'm just going to go here, hold down the Alt key to sample, click here, and then I need to make sure it's lined up. But then we can work something like this to remove those problem areas, and the same thing here. I'm going to go a bit closer with that one, sample from the top that way to maintain that line, and you can see how this is working bit by bit. And again, we need to sample that line there. So there we go. Now the final thing we need to do, you'll notice here that the wheel is static. There's no point kind of blurring that with a normal motion blur we've used. It won't look realistic. We want to use a little bit of radial blur. So I'm going to deselect again. The trick here, it actually does involve another selection. I'm going to make a very rough one for you here with the polygonal lasso. We're just going to go around the edge. This isn't good at all. Obviously you'll make a much better job of this when you've got a bit of time, but just to demonstrate how this is going to work. And there we go. Okay, then we're going to select this layer here, and all we're going to do is to go to filter, blur, radial blur, and we're going to select just 10 amount, which is a modest amount. And then what we want to do is select the erase tool and brush out those areas that we don't want blurred. We're going to take 0%, press 0 to get 100%, and again I'm going to do a rough job, but you can just see how here these sort of break areas we want to keep sharp, so we can brush those there. And then once we've done that work, you can use Control and F to repeat the process of the blur to make it a little bit stronger. So Control and F, that are on the radial blur again, you can see that, and then you can keep going till it's as you like it, and that blurs the tyre and the forks inside. And then Control D to deselect, and you can repeat the process for the back wheel. So I'm just going to again show you the finished version. So okay, if we go back in the history states, actually the easiest way for me is to close that, and you can see the finished version here with this wheel blur. We've got wheel blur in the back too, and also you've got the background blur. I'll hold down Alt now and click layer visibility, and you can see the difference the work has made.